Well, I did not see that coming. Now, I'm not a superstitious individual, although I can be convinced because, the last time I watched the U21s live on Villa TV on a Friday, they took the lead only to lose. And the following morning, early here, 4:30 a.m., we had the lunchtime kickoff against Newcastle and were trounced. So my apprehension going into this past weekend might have been triggered by those circumstances. But this past Saturday was the proverbial statement game, because if we are truly to improve on last year's 7th place finish, then it's teams precisely like Brighton and Hove Albion we're going to have to leapfrog. So I will now attempt to dissect in great detail why this was Unai Emery's finest hour at Villa Park, pushing the Newcastle 3-0 win well onto the back burner as we review Aston Villa 6. Yes, Aston Villa 6! Brighton and Hove Albion 1. I received so much fantastic video from this game, which I'll share with you from our correspondents here shortly. And I love it because it makes me feel connected and close to the club, even though I'm 7,400 miles away. And of course, it reminds me of a turning point in my life of going to Villa Park for the first time. And the one thing we as adults can never lose is that childlike wonderment of live sport. And I'm sure you remember what it was like the first time you went to Villa Park, maybe as a kid, or when you went to your first ever sporting event as a kid. It is something else. And I got those feelings when I watched young Sam Cunningham, who was a mascot in this game, escorting Pau Torres onto the hallowed, perfectly manicured live stage that is Villa Park as 42,000 fans roared him on. What must have been going through the young lad's mind, I can only imagine. But this is what we can never lose, that wonderment of football, that scene, getting your first shirt, meeting a player, the anticipation and anxiousness of hoping to see Villa win while you're there, and then the utter satisfaction when they do. Now, as I just mentioned, the Holy Trinity show had a legion of correspondents filing video from this match, including Andrew Gardner, who, like many, witnessed two of the most polar opposite performances and atmospheres that you possibly could inside a week. Andrew will have been grinning from ear to ear on the flight back to Canada. Also, Alex Dutton, guitar legend from the Birmingham-based metal band Atarka, and his girlfriend Jess were there filing some beautiful B-roll for us. And look who was there, none other than Paul Handsaker of 24/7 Services himself. Paul had a daddy-daughter day at the Villa with his two beauties, Lily and Eve. By the way, that's back-to-back league wins now with Paul and his kids in attendance, so the pressure's on for him to be at the Golden Palace for Wolves this weekend. And by the way, the thing about Paul that I love is that he has three joys in his life. Family, number one, the Villa, 1B, like right there, and the satisfaction he gets from working and making other people happy with the work his company does, that's like 1C. And those values are why we are partners on this show, because it's the exact same thing for me. So when you're ready to start your big project, 24/7 will be there to answer the phone. Paul will gladly talk some Villa with you. Now, I happen to have two sons, but if I had daughters like Lily and Eve there, this is how I would be when the lads start coming around. Hello, chap. You all right? Lily's busy right now with her nunnery lessons. But while she's doing that, how'd you like to help me polish my shotgun? All right, enough of this frivolity. Let's get to it. This is the Holy Trinity show, the three key issues or moments that defined Aston Villa 6, Brighton and Hove Albion 1, and we'll start with the key numbers. Now, if you were to look at these statistics without knowing the score, you would have thought that Brighton won this match comfortably. And this is where sometimes stats do not tell the whole story. We were okay on shots on target, by the way. That's a better ratio, 2-1 attempts versus on target. But everything else went Brighton's way except maybe for successful dribbles. And I put that in there because the Seagulls have maybe one of the best dribblers in the entire Premier League, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. When I see only 2 big chances created, yet we scored 6 goals, you know what that tells me? We are scoring goals from more difficult areas of the penalty box, and that is a very good sign. Be honest now, were you on one hand in utter delirium over the performance and the scoreline and the manner of how it played out, and yet deep down inside of you there was this niggling irritation over the goal we conceded because it somehow had Wednesday night Carabao Cup vibes to it? And if you are thinking that way, guess what? You are thinking like Unai Emery, always demanding more. Big issue, talking tactics, and you know how much I love talking tactics, but in this case, tactics were the difference in Aston Villa being victorious, which means this could easily be the number 1 big issue from this match. However, a plan or ideas are nothing if the players don't go out and execute. Once the players cross that white touchline, the manager's role becomes somewhat diminished because the manager and the technical team decide the tactics, players decide the game. And what I'm impressed about, why I'm excited, is because clearly the technical staff is able to identify strengths and weaknesses in the opponent. That is clear. They are also able to clearly and effectively communicate what those strengths and weaknesses are and then employ those principles into training. That's the hardest part. It also means our players are smart cookies that they can receive that information. But once the whistle sounds, it is down to the players to execute. Brighton is an incredible story, and that makes this win only that much more satisfying because of how well that club is run and how fast they have risen in the Premier League. The owner does not fall in love with players or managers or any staff. There's always somebody next in line to step in, whether that's a player or a technical person. They always seem to have the next hot shot lined up and ready to go, and they're willing to give those players a chance, whereas some bigger clubs in the Prem are reluctant to introducing young players to the Premier League standard. And then there's Roberto De Zerbi, who has, in such a short period of time, made everybody completely forget that Graham Potter even existed. I suspect that De Zerbi is a big admirer of Marcelo Bielsa only because of his man-marking system out of possession. That was a big calling card of Bielsa, but also it's where De Zerbi wants his players to accelerate, and they have power and acceleration through midfield, which is actually very similar to Aston Villa. We like to build out of the back, and we like to accelerate in the neutral third. So this was one of the biggest nuts for Unai Emery to crack, and one of the ways that they did so was by being far more direct and trying to play more penetrating passes through Brighton. You may have noticed that Emi Martinez played an awful lot more long balls from dead ball situations, 26 in fact, and even if those weren't accurate or retained, they were still played into an area of the park where Villa had numbers to go and try winning it back. One thing that seemed very obvious in Aston Villa's tactical plan was to press hard in that area just outside Brighton's box to about 15 yards outside that box. And it was committed and it was coordinated. And the key is you have to know the trigger. And in my opinion, and in this example, I think it's a slow ball and when Brighton players are facing their own goal. A great coach mentor of mine once told me, when you're teaching pressing to kids, yes, they have to know the trigger, but they have to go together, stay together, and arrive together. And that's exactly what Aston Villa did again and again in this region of the field or farther back. And when they won the ball, fast penetrating ball to either Diaby or Watkins, and Brighton simply could not recover. Big issue, the 270-minute club. The biggest fear I had after our Carabao Cup exit, where we looked very tired, was that we simply wouldn't have enough left in the tank for a big Premier League game just a couple of days away the following Saturday. And credit to 4 players and almost 5 for logging those 270 minutes in just 6 days, which is not recommended if you want to prevent injuries. But we just don't have the manpower right now. Pau Torres and Ezri Konsa are 2, and in fairness to center backs, they don't log as many kilometers as other outfield players, and they probably don't have as many intensive runs, but that's still asking a lot of them. Matt Cash does have to log a lot of kilometers because he's being asked to join the attack at times. Moussa Diaby was 11 minutes shy of going those 270 before he hobbled off against the Seagulls. Let's hope he's fully ready to go on either Thursday or the following Sunday. And then there was Douglas Luiz, who has one of the most demanding positions in the league, right in the middle of the park. And he is the guy that makes it all tick. And he went the distance this past week. Our Brazilian baller is now an $80 to $100 million footballer. And I'm impressed with the people who 4 or more years ago said, yeah, Douglas Luiz is going to be that player. And they were patient and they saw the signs already because, a lot of us weren't sure. We thought, he's not physical enough. He's not tidy enough on the ball. He's not confident enough. Well, he's all those things now. And he just played 270 hard minutes in the space of 6 days. There was a moment late in the game, you might recall, where he sprinted out as Villa were squeezing. I was half expecting him to pull up, but he did not because he's a machine. And never once in that game did I look at him and think, you're running on fumes. Major issue. Matty versus Mitoma. I think this was the marquee matchup from this fixture. And if there's one player on Brighton that terrifies me, it's Kaoru Mitoma, Mitoma-san, one of the best dribblers, not just in the Premier League, but maybe even the world. The guy wrote a university thesis on dribbling. And these two were head-to-head. Brighton's left, Villa's right. They came up against each other often. And although I don't get head-to-head statistics, the numbers were, I think, shocking as these two came together, starting with ground duels. Now, again, these aren't necessarily ground duels between them against each other, but Cash 9 for 11, Mitoma 3 for 15. One of the best dribblers in the world only attempted 7 dribbles and was only successful on 2 of them. And interesting, too, in fouls committed or fouls taken, Cash didn't commit any fouls but was fouled 3 times. Mitoma committed 3 fouls and was fouled once, which means that potentially he was chasing rather than initiating. I thought Matt Cash had a wonderful game. Not only did he neutralize one of the best and most dangerous players on the park, but he also contributed to Aston Villa's attack, and he also won 4 of 6 tackles. A developing issue while we're on the subject of ground duels. Nicolo Zaniolo played just under an hour. He had 16 ground duels. Do you know how many he won? 1 of them. 1 of 16. He attempted only 6 passes and completed 2 of them. He attempted 4 dribbles, failed on all 4 of them. He was dispossessed 4 times, and he gave away 4 fouls. I'm being serious here when I'm telling you we literally played with 10 men. Jacob Ramsey comes on and in half an hour's work did more in those 30 minutes than Zaniolo has in his 3 games combined. Jacob Ramsey is one of the first names on the team sheet when he's fully fit. He is our number 1 choice on the left side. And here's another footballer who's been bereft of Premier League football since the summer. And yet what does he do in under a half hour's work? He provides us with one of the greatest sounds there is. Post and net. What a goal that was, and I sure hope he is now getting back to full fitness and doesn't look back from here on in. I also truly believe that Unai Emery will get the best out of Nicolo Zaniolo and make him an asset for us because the left side is not his best position. It's somewhere on the right or the inside right channel, and I believe it's really just a matter of time. But the fact that we were so dominant, that we were able to win this game so comfortably at 6-1 by having nothing for an hour on the left side makes it even that much more remarkable. Moderate issue, gross gap. Roberto De Zerbi said in his Friday media availability that Pascal Gross gives Brighton and Hove Albion their confidence and their personality while also chipping in with goals regularly from the midfield. And every once in a while, you benefit from an opponent's absence. I'm not saying that Aston Villa couldn't have beaten Brighton with Pascal Gross in the lineup, but it certainly didn't hurt us. Big moment for me. You might be surprised by this, but Bouba's block. Brighton had just scored, still early stages of the second half. They had a set piece, and Boubacar Kamara read an opportunity and snuffed it out with a really crucial block. And I can only imagine what would have happened if Brighton had scored there and the nerviness that would have crept into Villa Park. Brighton came out in the second half the livelier of the two teams. They had 3 sets of new fresh legs on the park. The goal only made them more lively. They were getting some momentum. Let's not discount in the bigger context how important it was for Kamara to close down there and make that block. By the way, another great game for Boubacar Kamara, who is still such a young man. I mean, he right now is at the stage where Douglas Luiz was 3 or 4 years ago. Think about that for a minute. Think about how much room there is to grow with experience. But Boubacar Kamara and his skill set, who he is, allows Douglas Luiz to just go and be Douglas Luiz. Big moment, not just in this match, but in future matches as well. Ezri excused. As you'll recall, Ezri Konsa already on a yellow card when this little fracas occurred. And as they like to say, we've seen cards given for this kind of behavior. And it's not like we're flush with studs who could step right in and fill in for Konsa at, say, Wolves on the weekend. And how about that death stare from Ezri Konsa? Maybe he needs to stare down Gareth Southgate like that in order to get a sniff at the England team. Big moment number 3, the 4-1 goal. Backed up against Boubacar Kamara's block was the moment in the match when it was officially dusted. And that was probably also the moment that sent Adam Webster to therapy sessions this week. He was being watched, by the way, I think, with Lewis Dunk by England manager Gareth Southgate, who, upon leaving Villa Park, said to his assistant, "Which is this Konsa chap again? And do you know Ollie Watkins was really good, but he's no Mason Mount." Anyway, to use an analogy, this goal at Villa Park at this time was kind of like, do you ever cook with a pressure cooker? We do all the time in our house. You got to prepare everything, cut it all up, and then you put it in that sucker for an hour. An hour goes by. Everybody's getting hungry and desperate. They really want dinner. And then you get to push that button. And all the pressure leaves, and wonderful aromas fill the kitchen, and everybody's looking at it, and they're all anticipating dinner being here shortly. That's kind of what it was like. Big issue number 2, which piggybacks off number 3, measured McGinn. We know John McGinn was put in a very tough position on Wednesday night, having to play left back, but those turned out to be critical relief minutes for Luca Dean. But McGinn also provided 3 sublime moments in this match that led to goals. And like I said earlier, you could plan and prepare and even practice all you want in your tactical ideas. But when the game is actually on and it's happening at 100 miles an hour, you still need the players to be precise at the exact opportune moment. And McGinn was, starting with the 1-0 goal. It all seems so simple and so obvious, doesn't it? The penetrating ball between center back and fullback that allows the wide player to round the corner and then play a dangerous ball into the heart of the penalty area, which is what happened. And it was an inch-perfect pass at the precise moment when it needed to be played. And we all take that for granted and think, oh, well, that's easy. I could do that. If you and I played 14 minutes of Premier League football, we'd either be breathing out of our ring piece or in an ambulance. This is all happening in real time, and it's not just the ball. It's like a well-choreographed stage production. All the actors know the precise moment for the exact cue and the choreographed movement that allows them to get behind and take the lead. And on the aforementioned 4-1 goal, McGinn does it again using a totally different kind of pass. And this is now at 65 minutes when, believe it or not, a lot of footballers are starting to get voices inside their head telling them, I am dead tired right now. I don't like football anymore. My brain is starting to hurt. And when is this going to be over? And what does McGinn do? He floats an inch-perfect ball over the head of Adam Webster to the only place where Ollie Watkins can receive the ball cleanly. And from there, it's dusted. Completely different technique. Perfect range, perfect weight, inch-perfect accuracy. He delivers again. Then McGinn somehow recalibrates his hard drive and pulls a different arrow out of his quiver, and he plays an inch-perfect first touch ball, a slid pass into Ollie Watkins for goal number 6. And this is in second half stoppage time now, by the way, if you thought he was tired before. Well, now he's at the end of the game, and he's still fresh enough, in no time, no space, to play a first-time ball on a plate that leads to the Douglas Luiz goal. McGinn can be physical and play in the middle of the park. He can line out wide. He started out wide in this game, and that was his starting position, but he was very narrow throughout this game. He can turn people. He can win a tackle. He steps up and says, I'll play left back, Gaffer. I've questioned him at times because of his consistency, and I still think that that's something that he wants to work on. But in the critical moments in the game, arguably with the two most important goals as well, the 1-0 and the 4-1, the meatball delivered. And the number one big issue or moment that defined Villa 6, Brighton 1, outstanding Ollie. 2 hat-tricks now already to start the season. That's the first time a Villa player has achieved 2 hat-tricks in a season since the late 70s when Andy Gray did it. A relentless runner, a presser, a passer, and on Saturday, a ruthless finisher with both feet. And if you were astute enough to know his goal-scoring record of late against Brighton and Hove Albion, and you included him on your fantasy team, oh boy, 3 goals and assists, he was involved in all 6 goals. And you know, sometimes it's not about the beautiful strike, the clean connection. Sometimes it's about trying to catch goalkeepers and defenders off balance, which was the case for 2 of the goals. On the 1-0 goal, we have this expression here in Canada with hockey, and that is to keep your stick blade open and ready in the slot, so that if somebody fires a hard pass, you just have to redirect it on goal. It's almost impossible to save. Well, this is exactly what happened with Watkins. He just had to open up his left foot and angle it correctly and let the pace of Matt Cash's wonderful ball across guide it in, basically. This was as perfect a goal as you can conjure up because it's the pace of 2 players. Cash around the corner to beat his man, Watkins beating his defender and getting on the right side and staying onside, by the way, and 2 passes, the penetrating ball and Cash's across. It was so beautiful to watch, and I will never get bored of that kind of goal. Now, on the second one, the best way I could describe this technique is that he chops it. And he had clearly identified there was space at the base of the near post and that the goalkeeper was too upright. Then he uses the defender as a screen, and he just, like I say, chops at it. Now, I don't know what Nicolo Zaniolo is doing in this position. We got a little bit lucky here, but the goalkeeper did commit to the dive, so he saw the ball and dove, and that is a factor in these weird line of sight, vague, interfering with play type laws that we've had a lot of to start this season, but take nothing away from Ollie Watkins. He saw the moment, and he used the perfect technique to fool both goalkeeper and defender. And then on the hat-trick goal, he just wanted to get it off quickly again with his left foot as he saw imbalance in the goalkeeper and the defenders. And he could have never in a million years known that Adam Webster was going to deflect the ball somehow up because the shot was originally going low. But if he had waited a split second longer, then that's a block. The only thing missing for Ollie Watkins on Saturday was a headed goal for the perfect hat trick. And you know, he probably should have scored. the 6th goal himself, and he was annoyed with himself because he pounded the ground. Maybe he has some kind of wacky and lucrative 4-goal game bonus. But he was involved in Ramsey's goal. He was involved in the Estupiñán own goal. He was involved in all 6 goals. Afterwards, Watkins was asked about his goal-scoring record against Brighton, and he claimed that he didn't know anything about it until somebody told him. And like Ron Burgundy said in the comedic masterpiece Anchorman,
I don't believe you.
Strikers know exactly which teams they terrorized and even which grounds they tend to score more goals at. I just hope this cat puts pen to paper on a new contract. Right now, Ollie Watkins has a ton of leverage, and maybe he can even get an England call-up bonus in there, although I don't have a whole lot of faith in Gareth Southgate picking in-form players. There's young Sam Cunningham again after mascot duty. I'm sure he's still on cloud 9 as we speak. As we review and update the categories that we follow throughout the seasons, and man, this is fun to do after another home win. I mean, Villa Park, fortress. That's 9 points out of 9, and our away record's not too shabby either. Then there's the Watkins and Diaby combined goals for, up to 6 now. No set pieces, interestingly, in that game. Against the top 6, we're on the board. 3 out of a possible 9 points. We've scored first in 4 games, and our plus-minuses have improved drastically in both halves. The only blemish, again, not being able to keep a clean sheet. Next up, it's Europa Conference League action at Villa Park as Zrinjski Mostar makes the visit. They have 3 points in the group. We have none, and I can only imagine what the Villa fan base will be like if we don't take maximum points from our Bosnian visitors on Thursday. But there's also this tricky component of a Premier League match on Sunday at Molineux, which has become our bogey venue for some reason. And I talked about statement games. Well, what's the point of beating Brighton and Hove Albion 6-1 at home in magnificent style, a team you have to leapfrog if you have ambitions of climbing the table higher, only to then lay an egg on Thursday in Europa Conference League or go to Molineux and lose 1-0 again. And this is where Unai Emery has to determine the priorities and also figure out how he's going to rotate the squad. You can't play your best team 3 games in a row, even though this week is going to be made up of 8 days, unlike last week, which was made up of 6. So it's going to be very intriguing how we navigate the waters of this week. But I'm greedy. I want to win both. It was another 2-win weekend in this household. Aston Villa's 10th straight Premier League victory at Villa Park, up to 5th place, 1 win out of 1st, and my mighty Ravens, 3-1 winners to top the table heading into Canadian Thanksgiving weekend, which is this coming weekend. Spectacular fall colors everywhere. I'm bursting. I don't even know what to do. I'm so excited. I just want the momentum to keep on rolling. And I don't need to tell you to savor this one, because this is right up there with 7-2 in my opinion, and maybe better because there were fans at this one. Until the Europa Conference League on Thursday, be well. And as always, up the mighty Villa.